Hello everybody, Keith here again. Going to do the second part of my Development Orchids series. This is 3 months on from the last one, and some have changed, some have hardly moved at all. But we've got some interesting things to see, I think. So let's start where we started last time. This is Talumnia hawksiana, and I strongly suspect that you're going to see far better what I'm talking about with this from the still photograph that you've seen just before the video part. But what I can say, and I hope you can see, is that we've got a new fan starting and we've got a number of new roots with nice green tips. So this cork is quite clearly a much more suitable substrate than the piece of twig which I used before. So that's all positive. It's still got quite a long way to go because it's a small, very small plant anyway, but it's nowhere near the size of the fans that I got when it arrived from Zana, and the roots aren't as long, but we have got roots and they're not dying off and they're going green. I'm still treating it in very much the same way as I said before, spraying it most but not every morning with orchid mist spray fertiliser, the stuff you buy in a spray bottle, and then at least once more with rainwater. And I give it a good spray. In fact, I've started now, just beginning to warm up a smidge, spraying the bark with rainwater and then spraying the plant with the fertiliser to try and give it that little bit of extra humidity. So that's Talumnia hawksiana. And here we have Phalaenopsis equestris, and this one has changed quite a lot in the last 3 months. For a start, we've got a new flower spike which has got more flowers on it, or more buds on it I should say, than the previous spike, which is this one. This terminal keiki and the mother plant have both put an extra leaf out, and now in the last week or so this is starting to put a root out. Now whether one root will be enough, whether it'll put some more roots out, I don't know, but very clearly this is quite happy. It has been repotted in the interim, you can see that on the channel, but it's quite clearly doing very well, and it's doing exactly what Sarah said it would do when I bought it from her, that if you can keep a Phalaenopsis on your windowsill, once this got going a little bit, you could treat this like any other Phalaenopsis, and so it's proving. Masdevallias Patricia Hill. Now last time I just repotted it, and the repotting seems to have really given it a kickstart. It's got a number of new growths. I've no idea how many, because every time I count them I get a different number. They are proving a bit tricky. Now then, how can I show this best? If we look here, that's a sheath. Here we are. That is a new growth, and that is erupting in a sheath. And what it should do is burst through the top of the sheath like this one's doing, and away you go. Now unfortunately several of these have got trapped. The sheath hasn't split, I've got one where it buckled the leaf, this one's buckled the stem. Now, it's quite interesting, trying to catch it. All the ones that I've managed to free off so far have straightened out. But I've got one in the middle that I cannot reach, which appears to be doing that. And I'm very loath to mess around too much in case I do more harm than good. So I might end up leaving that. But we're talking about here 6, 7, 8 new growth, something like that. And we've got quite a lot of new roots appearing and growing and doing very nicely. It certainly seems to like this mixture of moss, bark and perlite. The roots are staying green. It did go pale the other day when it wanted watering, which is a nice indicator to pick up. So it will be very interesting to see how we go further with this, but we've got a lot of roots and I'm more than pleased with this. It's in a more or less in a mix that Mick Masdevallias, Mick Hardy of Mick Masdevallias, suggests in his videos, and my version of it is doing this very well. Now we've got a problem, which is one that I've got with any cool growing orchid, is in the winter this conservatory suits them very well. It gets down to 14 or 15 at minimum, usually more like 16 or so, because we have got some central heating in here. And with the blinds down as they are at the moment, because we're having some cold nights, it's not too bad. It's the days that are damaging, because in here we can get 30 plus if I'm not around to open the windows. So before very much longer this is going to have to come out of here, just because it's going to get too hot. So I think what I want to do for a start is move it onto one of our bedroom windowsills. We're starting to get some room for that. And I can take that upstairs, and initially I think that will keep it cool enough to keep it reasonably happy. Eventually I think it's going to end up going outside. I've got some ideas for that. And hopefully I can manage that, but at the moment I'm going to try just keeping it in a cooler room. But that's Masdevallias Patricia Hill, which is Ignia crossed with Wellishii, and I'm really glad that's doing all right, because it's a very pretty flower. Bulbophyllum fascinator, the species Bulbophyllum. When we looked at it last time, there were signs of 2 new growths, and those new growths have developed exactly along the lines of what it did last time, which is, I suppose, what it should do, in that they begin quite close to the parent bulb, and then, as you can see quite clearly here, the rhizome extends and the next pseudobulb forms at the end. Now I tried to give it a bit more daylight, put it a bit closer to the window, along with its compatriot. I'm not sure that was the best idea. It's drying out much faster. So what we're seeing, and what's alerted me, is these older pseudobulbs are starting to get a little bit wrinkled. So I'm going to probably move it back to where it was, which will give it a bit less light. And I suppose by now it probably isn't going to flower, but we'll see how we go. But anyway, we've got developments there. This one is a little bit further on of the 2 it was before. If you go and have a look at the previous video, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link in the description box. We have got some roots beginning to show, so it's doing okay, but I think it can do better. Dendrobium jenkinsii has done absolutely nothing since we looked at it. Oh, hello? Oh, yes, we have got something happening. We very much have something happening. And I literally spotted this as I've been talking to you guys. Now then, can you see where my finger is? That is a flower spike. They come off the side of the pseudobulb. There's a sort of notch about halfway down the canes of pseudobulbs on this, little tiny things, and that's where they come from. So this is going to flower, which is nice. If it only flowers on one, well, so be it. But that's a nice surprise. I'm really chuffed about that. But basically, there's no new growths yet. The roots are still working fine. It's hydrated. So once it puts some new growths out, we get some new roots, then it's going to go onto a piece of cork. I think that'll be good. It'll help, put it in a better position to extend. But at the moment, it put 4 or 5 new growths up last year. We've now got a flower spike. I say if I only get one, well, I only get one, but never mind. I've got a flower spike. That's got a smile on my face, as you can probably see. Psychopsis mariposa. I'll stand back a little bit so you can see the whole plant. The spike is doing well. We've got another flower bud forming there, so that's progressing nicely. Overall, the plant is doing well. The large of the 2 new growths that you saw last time has extended and unfurled its leaf, and I think it's putting roots out, so fairly soon that'll start pushing up its pseudobulb. And the one that was difficult to see is now quite clear, so that's growing as well. But there's a big but this time. If you go and have a look at the last video when it was repotted, there was a leaf standing up here, and the bulb it was on ended up, because I wanted to lower the whole thing, it ended up in the compost. Now, it's fairly well known that these things do not like damp around the new growths. But what this actually proves to me is what it doesn't like is damp around this little seam there. The junction between the leaf and the pseudobulb. There's a little line on all of them. It's like a seam, and that's where it's come off. And below that pseudobulb doesn't look very clever at all. It's yellow and it's shriveled. So they don't like to be disturbed. I'm going to have to try, if I possibly can, to excavate down, because they're not a massive plant. The pseudobulbs are not huge. So hopefully, if I'm careful, I'll be able to move the compost and stuff away from here and be able to get to that to snip it off and get some cinnamon on the joint. But that's something that's typical of these Psychopsis. It's growing new growths which are growing very well. It's got flowers on it, but it doesn't like damp. It's a moisture loving orchid that doesn't like to get damp. Oh boy. Now we've got the 3 Restrepias. This is Cuprea. Hasn't done anything really. It's flowered several times in the last few months, but it's not growing. it looks healthy enough, as I say, it's been flowering. But what this is beginning to suggest to me is these are cool growing, we know that, they come from the cloud forest. Now, as I've said with the Masdevallia just now, these things like it on the cooler side. Below 25 is great. Now they're in that tank with cling film over the top to give it a reasonable seal. So the humidity is extremely high. So this fern, as well as these, are doing fine. And I've had this out the bottom, the roots and everything are great, but it's not growing. So my feeling about this is, although the humidity suits it and the temperature suits it, it'll survive and it'll flower, because they've all flowered really well for me this year. What I don't think it's doing is growing. It's the wrong temperature. I know Roger said that all his cool growing plants will grow in the winter and then they just stall in the summer. Well, I think that's what's happening with these. And what I'm going to do before very much longer, as I am with the Mazzy, I'm going to move these to an upstairs bedroom windowsill in the tank, and the temperature in there is going to be around 18-20, rather than, as it can easily get to in here, in the room we can get into the high 20s. What it is in the tank, I have no idea, but I'm darn sure it won't be below 25. So I think that's something to look at. So anyway, this is not showing any signs of growth, either cakeys or new growth from the base, but it's surviving and looking reasonably good. Probably one of the last flowers this year, I strongly suspect. This is Restrepia brachypus. It had 2 flowers on. That's going over, unfortunately, because it's beautiful, and that's the one that's gone over altogether. No new growths, but we have got this cakey, which is put out before, and it had just started to put some roots out, and we've now got 2, so I'm hoping you can see that. Quite clearly the same applies. The roots are quite happy. The plant, I wouldn't exactly say thriving, but it's been flowering quite merrily, having struggled to start with, but now we're doing okay. So I need to do something with this cakey, because it's starting to pull things over elsewhere on the plant. It's making the plant out of balance. So I'm going to have to try putting some stakes on it or something like that, because it's upsetting the plant. And this one is Sanguinea. It's the one that I repotted a short while ago, so it hasn't really had time to recover. But it's not flopped or anything like that. It's quite happily moist down below, so I think everything is fine as far as that goes. But we're just waiting to see something happen. But I suspect we're going into the wrong time of year for these to be growing madly. But as I just said, I've got to do something to get them into a better temperature range, and still give them plenty of light. That's the one thing about the Masdevallia. We know that they don't like direct sunlight, but do they like light levels higher than they're actually getting? I'm not sure. I think it's possible the Mazzy might need a little bit more light than it's getting. But the problem is, I've only got one, I've only just bought it, so it's difficult to actually know whether or not the rate of progress for the new leaves that have come up and burst through the sheath is normal or is being held up. But when it goes upstairs, it should get a bit more light as well. This is the same one of the Cymbidium mavenine jesters that I showed you last time. I've watered it today. I pulled it out to photograph it earlier on this afternoon, and it was beginning to look a little bit shriveled and the leaves are a bit floppy. The media was a bit on the dry side, so it's had some. One thing I didn't notice when I was photographing is that we've got a new growth. I don't know whether it's, I can't imagine it's a flowering spike at this time of year, but we've got a new growth, and that's the first one I've seen off one of these. So despite everything, we've actually got something something happening with that one. That's the one that is in the bark and ceramis mix. The other two are in plain bark. Can't actually see anything on that, but again, these were looking a little bit floppy, so these have been given a bit of a soak. They're not doing too bad. We've got leaves coming through on this new one. There's a number of new leaves, but nothing's dying back. So I think on the whole, we're not doing too bad with these. Same with this one, we've got plenty of leaves, but no signs of a new growth, but that's great. But I think again, it might be a little bit warm for it, possibly a little bit bright. Now we're getting round into longer days and longer afternoon sunshine, so it may well be that these are going to have to come a little bit further back from the window than they have been, or be moved around a bit. But it won't be very long before these go outside with the others. Once we haven't got any more risks of overnight frost, these will go outside, and I think once they go outside they should do a lot better. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last of the orchids that we're looking at. So we've seen some progress in most. Some haven't done an awful lot, but we've seen a couple of surprises for me. It shows how observant I am. So anyway, thank you for watching. I trust you find this interesting and possibly even a bit useful. So I'll see you soon. Bye.